For the following exercises, sketch the graph of the exponential function. Determine the domain, range, and horizontal asymptotes. So I picked negative 2 to the x here, 240 and 243, because in an earlier video I graphed f of x equals 2 to the x, and this was the graph here. Now this is one of those base graphs that we see. Any exponential is going to look similar to this. So that's one thing to take away from this. Now again, they always go in an upward, they always go in an upward position there. That's how those exponentials look. And if I get a negative on it, it could flip it left, flip it right. It could make it flip downward. So all of those components that we had previously about transformation still applies here with these functions. Nothing changes here. So let's take a look back at this one. So we know the original function of the f of x equals 2 to the x should look similar to this. Now, what's happening here is they negated the 2 to the x. So that means I'm negating this, which means I'm negating all of my y values. So what that means, if I'm negating all my y values, that means everything that's up here is now going to be down here. And that will look like this here. So now, to be a little more precise about our graph, I know my point was generally here with the original, which tells me now it's going to be down here. And the graph I'm going to get, just to be more precise, and again, that's not an exact, but it's a lot closer to the original than when my graph up here was. But just having that idea there, we sketch the graph of the exponential function, and then it says determine the domain and range. So that means my domain here is going to be all real numbers, so negative infinity to infinity. And my range is going to be negative infinity to 0. And it doesn't include the 0 because when I think about the range, that's how far up and how far down I go. And that's what that means. So it goes all the way down to negative infinity, and the highest it goes is to 0. And if you look at this horizontal asymptote here, you can see that I get closer and closer to it as I go towards negative infinity with my x. But I'll never be 0. So that's why my range has a parenthesis at the 0 and not a bracket. So that's my domain and range of 240. Let's take a look at 243 now. We're going to use this same idea here. So let's just take this away and this away. Our original still looks like this. I guess I could draw a better one here. I know that looks kind of tired. It's a tired one. So we're looking at something like this, and that's the original base function, I should say. So now we're going to negate the function to begin with. So now it's going to be downward. Okay, that's the first thing. That's that negative. Then it's going to shift up 1. So now the horizontal asymptote, instead of 0, is going to be at 1. And then this thing moves up. And actually it crosses at 0 then, which means I got to draw it a little better actually. And then what it's going to do is it has a negative on the x too. So now that's going to flip it this way. And then this end is going to go that way. And that's hard to think about, but I'll show you what that means. Now remember, it went this way to begin with. But since the x is negated, it's going to go this way. So that's what we're actually looking at here as we go through all of those transformations. Now again, in the future we'll have to describe that transformation. So now if I look at this graph then, it's going to go through 0, 0. And it's going to approach 1. 1's the new asymptote. And this is going to approach it, and as it gets closer to it, and this one's going to come. Oops, let me fix this side. I think it goes a lot steeper, faster. So anyways, this is going to be our function. So if we look at the domain, negative infinity to positive infinity, it goes all the way left and all the way right and everything in between. My range then is going to be from 1, I should say 1's the high actually, because it's going downward, so negative infinity to 1, and not including the 1 because it's getting closer to it, because my equation is y equals 1, where the horizontal asymptote is. So that's my domain and range in my sketch of my graphs of 240 and 243.